Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting our students to learn what we teach. And I am Rob Alvarez. I'm the founder of Professor Game and professor of gamification and games-based solutions at IE Business School, EFMD, EBS University, and many other places around the world. And if this content is for you, then please go ahead and subscribe to our email list for free at professorgame.com/subscribe. Hey, Engagers, and welcome back to another episode of the Professor Game podcast. And we have Corey with us today. But Corey, are you prepared to engage?
I am prepared to engage.
Let's do this. We have Corey Hord with us, who is currently employed at the Mondelēz, you said?
Mondelēz, yeah, you got it.
Mondelēz International, Oreo, Chips Ahoy, Ritz, Sour Patch Kids, Swedish Fish, Clif Bar, and beyond. As an operational excellence professional, was implementing the company's integrated Lean Six Sigma program across the United States. He has over a decade of operations experience, Brew Alliance, Anheuser-Busch, BJC HealthCare, Mondelēz International, with the bulk of his career in consumer packaged goods. And his education consists of a Master of Business Administration from Webster University and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Kentucky. Outside of all this formal education, he holds a Green Belt certification in Lean Six Sigma and is a trained facilitator of Lego Serious Play. He's also a CrossFit Level 1 trainer. He started his own consultancy back in 2022 called The Methods Company, where his mission is to solve problems with the world's best methodologies through workshops and consulting. He is a trained facilitator with credentials in LSP, Lego Serious Play, and comes alongside his decade-plus experience with Lean Six Sigma and Agile methodologies and is the makeup of his core disciplines offered through this consultancy we just mentioned. So Corey, a lot of stuff going on in your life. Is there anything that we left out of this intro?
I don't think so, but it sounds busy when I sit back and listen to it from this lens, right? So definitely busy stuff going on, but it all ties together, right? So I think you got it all covered.
Certainly does. So Corey, we always like to understand, what does the day of one of our interviewees looks like? What are you doing? What does being a Corey Hord nowadays look and feel like?
Yeah, so it depends, I would say. That's how I would start the phrase. And I kind of double hat a little bit in my current role. So I work remotely most of the time, or at least probably 50% of the time. And during that time, I'm doing some capability building stuff. And then I also hit the road and travel to Mondelēz has about 47 direct store delivery locations. We might end up touching on different parts of the business, but I'm traveling to those locations and I am their auditor. And auditing our Lean Six Sigma program is what I do on site. So I get to put on that auditor hat. I'm going to be critical of all the gaps that live within our program. And I'm going to not only tell the folks on site where the misses are, but I'm going to take off that auditor cap, so to speak, and then I'm going to put on that capability building hat, and I'm going to help them close those gaps and partner with them after the assessment. And assessment week can be pretty intense. So when I say it depends, assessment weeks, we're big on putting ourselves where the process starts. So my start times will range big time because we shadow the delivery processes. Those typically start anywhere from 10 p.m. at night to 4 in the morning. So we're going to shadow that driver and spend some time with them. We're going to shadow all the warehouse processes because we think within our Lean Six Sigma program that everything starts at the fundamentals, right? So where the process starts, how the process lives and breathes, current state, we're going to look at that and see what gaps do exist. We do that against standard operating procedures and do some of that. And so we also go through a myriad of documents and things like that to try to figure out every gap. A lot of folks when we come on site, they say, man, this crew leaves no stone unturned when they come figure out what we've got going on in our operation. And that is true. And it can be a pretty tough pill to swallow when we're going over the shortcomings of an operation. But my favorite part of that is when I get to be back at home, not just being at home, but then I get to put on that support cap and be that supporting role. And my life certainly looks different at home. I know we mentioned some CrossFit. So I start my day off with CrossFit, and then I'll get into my days filled with all kinds of meetings with different people from across the country where I'm trying to help them with where they are and meet them where they're at in the process and in the journey. And that looks differently for everybody, right? Some people do really well with our Lean Six Sigma program and they move right along at their own pace, a very good pace. And then some people struggle, right? And so my big thing for people is to just meet them where they are, right? And figure out what they need and how to help them. And that oftentimes actually means like reframing how we think and how we approach people and do things. So it's a wild, ever-changing environment, to be honest with you, but it's a lot of fun. I love what I do. And I've been in Lean Six Sigma for a long time, right? And I don't know, hopefully the listeners know what Lean Six Sigma is, but for me, I always summarize it with people that it's just discipline and operations, right? We're trying to have discipline routines, discipline processes, and do that. And we're going to reduce that variability in the process, and then we're going to get better results in the end. And that's the goal. And obviously the end for us is putting those products that we mentioned at the front of the podcast in consumers' hands. There's processes and things that lead up to that to make that a success for people, pulling that package off the shelf and getting what they expect each and every time. So that's kind of a day-to-day a little bit. So I know it's not a straightforward answer, but the summary is, assessing, auditing, whatever you want to call it, and capability building.
That sounds amazing. And I'm thinking that capability building is especially where all those workshops fall into place. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So that's for sure the truth. And so I love, if I can. I'm not a big fan of presenting to people and preaching at them, right? So I love workshopping. I love even building custom workshops, right? And kind of rethinking how we deliver content to people. And I'll talk about, later on some exposure that I've had and stuff about some rules that I've learned along the way about trying to eliminate PowerPoint in order to engage the audience, right? And do some things that are a little bit different. So yeah, for sure.
Let's do this. And let's actually talk about perhaps one of those times, but not, one of those top star times where everything went as planned and everything went well and you got great results. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But we actually want to talk about one of those times where things did not go your way. One of those fail moments or first attempts in learning, which are, in my opinion, and as we've seen in the podcast, crucial to actually getting to the big successes. So can you tell us that story?
Yeah, I love this frame up, right? So a lot of people, I'm going to preface this whole conversation with, like, early on in my career, you try to dodge failure, which is crazy to think about now being where I'm at in my career and stuff. Because man, does failure teach you some really good lessons and start building the base for you to jump off of, right? And so it's crazy just to think back and rewind to my early career and try to dodge failure. And failure is actually, it's a healthy thing, right? It's just, again, building that platform so you can jump off of. So we actually, when I came into the company early on, I was very quickly handed, we had this points program set up, which was an employee recognition program. They could accumulate points and do some stuff through some different activities. And this was for our on-site folks, so what we call our core team, right? So they could accumulate points and stuff. I was handed this program because it was just framed up under a safety lens only, and we wanted to frame it up across the broader Lean Six Sigma program within Mondelēz International. So our program has 10 pillars across it. So without getting into too much of the details, right, our program is divided into kind of these business sectors, so to speak, and we kind of compartmentalize a little bit so we can kind of organize the program, right, and the different functions of the business. So I had been handed this program. The ask was, hey, we want to take this across the whole program so we can not just have recognition for safety only, while it is safety first is kind of our motto and it's important. We want to recognize across the broader platform of our Lean Six Sigma program. So started doing that, revamped it. We called it IDSD points is what we called it. So for the folks that don't know what DSD means, it is direct store delivery, very common in the supply chain realm. Some people call them wholesalers as well. I've heard that different in my Anheuser-Busch days, but essentially we're trying to rethink this recognition program and expand it out. So in 21, I'm giggling a little bit because we failed right out the gate. We got it revamped. We pushed the program out to everybody. I thought things were going super well. We redesigned the cards and rebuilt all this stuff. And I was instrumental in doing all this. And then it kind of fell flat a little bit. And when I say it fell flat, the recognition or the redemption of the points just wasn't there. We started getting reports back and nothing changed. So it was kind of a failure. And I was just like, oh man, this is horrible. We rethought it, and I put in all this work and stuff and it wasn't working. That doesn't mean it was broken. I actually learned some stuff along the way. I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink and the book Extreme Ownership, right? I'm a huge fan of that. And so I had learned actually during my time at BJC HealthCare to kind of look inward, right? If it's broken and there's a path of least resistance that humans are taking to avoid what it is you created, the problem is probably with the program in general, right? So I took an approach to rethink and figure out kind of where the snag was, which is very common in Lean Six Sigma realm, and to figure out, hey, what's the bottleneck here? What's holding this thing up? Because it's not like the program was really a bad thing, right? People could accumulate points and they could get vacation packages, or they can get a chair, a drill, whatever they wanted, they could do through this incentive program. So it's like, hey, that all makes sense. That's a good thing. But there was a couple barriers to execution to get there, right? So folks had issues with their logins. They had issues getting on the website and stuff, and we did not make it easy as a business to do that. So we ended up just rethinking some stuff and doing some additional communication. We did something really cool actually in 2023 for our program, our Lean Six Sigma program. We always do a review season at the end of the year where we might do some changes and might do some tweaks, and then that will take shape for the next year, right? And so we actually added a component in our program that holds the management team accountable to making sure their employees are redeeming the program. So we also had issues with people stockpiling these cards. They would lose them and there would be no redemptions. That would take our numbers down. So I just added a few little tweaks, right? Nothing huge, nothing big. The program at its core was awesome and things were good, but we added a few tweaks to the program, and I'm happy to say that this year our redemption is way, way up. I literally, I just had a call yesterday from our sales side of the business, and the program is catching so much wind that they've somehow heard about it. I have no idea how, but I spent an hour with them talking through what that looks like and stuff and how we've made this happen, right? So that initial failure and that initial disappointment isn't the end game, right? It's just about, sometimes you got to circle back and revisit and try to figure out where those bottlenecks are, and then it can be a success, right? And I don't know the Michael Jordan quote, right? But I know he was asked why he was so successful, right? And it was more about the opportunity, right? About taking all these opportunities, take those shots that no one kept track of the shots he had missed, but he had so many opportunities to make the shots. And that's what it's about, right? It's about taking more opportunities along the way and just taking another swing at it, right? Getting back up to the plate, taking another shot and going for it. And sometimes it might mean rebuilding it, but oftentimes it's just small tweaks, right? To get it across the finish line.
That sounds amazing, Corey. Actually, you were reminding me of a story of this fellow, I think it was when I was a project manager. It was actually a fellow project manager from our team. We used to have every now and then these sort of presentations on, things we've learned lately and, what's up and so on. And he was talking about, he was sort of taking something from sports. It was this, not sure who the athlete was, but this person saying, when you're a top athlete, right, you cannot make something that improves your performance 20%. A single athlete is almost impossible to get you that 20, right? But what you can do is make small, mini improvements regularly of 1%, maybe 0.5, 0.3%. Many of those put together actually can get you the way that you want. And that's where you can actually improve your performance in that level. So it kind of reminded me what you were saying of doing it over and over and over again to get that slight edge that actually takes you to be from one of the best in the world, like Michael Jordan once was, the best in the world at that time, right?
Oh, I love that. That's so good.
Amazing. So Corey, we've talked about that difficult story, that difficult time where it didn't really go your way, but let's actually go in the opposite direction. One time where, again, it could be the first attempt or the nth attempt, it doesn't matter, where actually things went really well. One of those sort of proud projects or proud moments you can tell us about, because we want to learn from that. We want to maybe find some of the success factors in there.
Yeah, man, my mind immediately actually goes to Lego Serious Play. That's a very timely plug. I got to tell you, I went through a wild experience of, I was actually finishing up my master's degree, and the person that was offering the certification was going to, for the first time, do live classes. And I had discussed with my wife, and I was like, I got to do this, right? I got a double hat here, and I'm going to make this happen. And so I went through the training, got certified, did all that, but I was really unsure about where to go from there. And my wife said something super simple to me that was so impactful. She just said, hey, just take the next step, right? Very similar to the conversation we just had about taking that small step and just that next step. And she was like, what is your next step? And I was like, I really need to do a workshop, right? And I need to feel how that is going to feel. And I've got to tell you, I don't know, a lot of folks, I try to tell folks I've done several workshops now with Lego Serious Play and really beyond that. But Lego Serious Play specifically, that methodology is so incredible. and it puts the participants in a place and space of vulnerability to where they can think in a different way, right? And the workshop is so wildly successful in the experiences that I've done it, that people are just like, wow, you're an amazing facilitator. And I'm just typically, I like to be super humble about that, right? And I usually tell them, I got to tell you, the methodology is doing the heavy lifting. I'm just delivering it and taking it across the finish line and taking you through the process and the steps and doing that. But man, what a wildly successful thing it has been for me to experience and do Lego Serious Play. Especially, I've done it several times within Mondelēz International. I've done a handful of workshops on the outside as well, and picking up traction over time with that methodology. But every time it has not changed. I walk away just being like, wow, it's just an amazing thing. The most recent one I did, I always tell this story to folks about it, is I took this group through this workshop, and this is a group of leaders across the state of Missouri. And we were doing this with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, and I took them through the workshop. And by the end of the workshop, I tell people that the room was thinking so much. They had no idea that I was even there. And what a successful place to be in as a facilitator, to know I've done my job. I could literally slip out the back door and these folks are in a place and space of thinking and idea generation that they don't need me anymore, right? And they're drafting actions and they're moving forward without you. And I'll never forget that moment of standing there and thinking, these folks have taken over this room and they are brainstorming together and they're standing closer to one another and they're crafting next steps forward, and they don't even know I'm here, right? And that is a successful spot to be in, as weird as that sounds. But that methodology for me has been just crazy successful every time I've done it.
Well, I guess that's kind of what it means to facilitate, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I've certainly had my my fair share of rough facilitation things, and I know we'd mentioned, on the front end, CrossFit, right? And CrossFit has its own, it's facilitation, right? At its core is what it is. But I've had a couple of episodes. It has a few different dynamics to it, right? There's a clock involved and things like that. And I do certainly have an episode to where I had some not so great clock management, or the clock gave me some fits. And so I definitely have some failures I've brushed up against, right? But Lego Serious Play, though, with that one, so far, it's almost been a home run every time. And I'd like to say that I'm amazing stepping up to the plate and batting. But again, that methodology does the heavy lifting. It's super good.
Absolutely. I actually love Lego Serious Play. I haven't been doing it for that long, but I've enjoyed every single time. I had been doing some stuff with Lego Serious Play. I was aware of the methodology. I read some books on it, but of course, it's never the same thing, right? From being aware to actually going through the workshops.
Yeah, so good.
So you've discussed, the ups and the downs, and of course you've been doing this for quite a while. And I don't know if it's directly about gamification or one of your Lego Serious Play workshops, or in general, if you were approached, a problem that you wanted to solve using one of these tools, what is your process like? How do you do it?
Oh man, definitely a loaded question a little bit. So, I think my mind immediately jumps back to the reason why I got Lego Serious Play, right? So initially I'd existed for a long time in this space of that capability building is a bit of a gap that we tend to, across these large companies that I've worked for, we tend to want to preach to people. And I was like, man, there's got to be a different way, right? And so over time, it was just, I'd gotten into Lego Serious Play and kind of stumbled upon it by accident. Literally, the story behind it is I saw it on someone's LinkedIn profile just by happenstance of browsing LinkedIn one day. And I was like, Lego Serious Play, what is that? And like you, I stumbled upon a couple books. I read about it and I was like, I want to learn more. And so then I ended up taking the certification. But really, I did that to get my foot in the door a little bit, right, with people, because I wanted to, from the onset, to have a different experience with me, whether that's with Mondelēz International or some of the stuff I've done on the outside with, outside of Mondelēz International. I just wanted people to know from the get-go that, hey, this guy does things a little bit different than we're used to. And I think that's like super important for me, of like when I'm going to do whatever it is I do with people and when I'm going to partner with them, that Lego Serious Play was really a foot in the door. But my long game a little bit is more in operations consulting and doing like more workshops and teaching really Lean Six Sigma and supply chain principles and practices through different ways of learning. I've always done this, not on purpose. I'd love to tell you that my career has been super calculated, but it's always been like, I'm struggling to learn this concept or whatever it is. Like when I was working for BJC HealthCare, which they're like one of the largest healthcare providers in Missouri, we struggled with 5S methodology. And I literally built a workshop from the ground up that we did that was very hands-on about them having their own warehouse, and we were downsizing, some of the portfolio, and they had to get that stuff out of their warehouse. And we kind of walk through, right, the sort, set, shine, standardize, sustain, and all those steps, and let them build their thing. And they would actually fulfill orders in this workshop, and we would actually show improvement over time. And they would multiple times fulfill orders, and they would just get better and better the more steps they focus. So I'm really into that, of teaching that methodology, all these things through whatever it is I'm teaching. Most of my work is spent in the Lean Six Sigma realm, so I'm teaching those principles and practices, but I like to do it through ways that are a lot different. And we just did a workshop in Nashville literally last week that, very similar hands-on workshop. That was a lot of fun too.
That's amazing.
Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification.
When you're, you've discussed all the experience that you had, and of course, we know your process, a little bit of it at this point. Would you say that there is some form of a best practice, something that, at least makes your project a little bit better, the way they work, the way, the results that they get, that one thing that maybe makes things a little bit better?
Oh man, yeah, absolutely. When you say that question, my mind immediately goes to, I had a session with a gentleman that I'll tell you more about later on, but this gentleman had a rule about no PowerPoint. So I'd stumbled upon this gentleman through taking that next step, right? I know we talked about early on in the episode here about my wife telling me, hey, take that next step, right? And over time, I took those small steps, and this led me down a path of being introduced to this gentleman. And I got a one-on-one session with him for an hour, and he, this is a pivotal moment for me, but he said they were in a new space, and he pointed over at this TV that was covered with a black sheet and said, did you notice the TV was covered up? And I was like, I didn't really know what it was. And he was like, do you know why that is? I was like, not sure. Tell me more. And he said, we don't do PowerPoint here. We don't do presentation. I was like, wild thought. I literally left this meeting with this gentleman, and I'd messaged my team within Mondelēz International and said, hey, I just met with a guy. Here's a rule, no PowerPoint. And I was like, wouldn't that be a wild thought in our world where we capability build, especially remotely, if we thought about things in a different perspective, right? So I'm not saying for the folks listening, I'm not outlawing PowerPoint, right? But I am saying, for me at least, I have approached my teachings and capability building in a different lens. I'd already done that through workshopping, but through remote lens, it can be a little bit more difficult, where our default is, let's do PowerPoint, right? And let's go through that and do some of that. And I think it's important to rethink that. That's the best practice for me, is rethinking that approach and making sure that whoever it is you're delivering content to, that you're engaging them right, and that you're also asking for feedback along the way. Is this working? Is it not? Instead of preaching to somebody for an hour with a PowerPoint, can we flip that on its head and build some exercises? And again, they might not be perfect. We often get like this kind of paralysis by analysis thing of like overthinking what we're doing, but sometimes you can find little pockets where you can engage the audience and get their feedback along the way. And you can use kind of some improv skills a little bit, which is another thing I've done, right? That's important for facilitation, is taking a few improv classes to learn to think on your feet and to figure out, how can I change this as a facilitator a little bit for the audience so they have the best experience possible. So just coming out of a frame of mind of no PowerPoint, or limited PowerPoint, I would say, is my modified rule. And how can we workshop this instead? It makes a big impact on people. And it also, when I think back to that conference I told you about that I just came from in Nashville, we had lots of presentations, and not that the presentations were bad or anything, but I would venture to say that folks are going to remember a couple of things, right? They're going to remember the stories that were told, and they're going to remember some of the hands-on activity, right? And the interactions with people are probably a few things they're going to take away. They may not remember that spreadsheet that was pulled up with financial numbers on it, right? That might be like, whew, that's a lot for me. So I just think we have to like rethink and turn things on its head. And my philosophy typically on that is, I heard at one point in time about, we don't have to tell kids to play video games, right? I know not everyone's child plays video games, but most kids by and large, video games they like to play them, right? We don't have to tell them to sit in the chair and play video games. We often have to tell them to step away. So how can we do that in the professional world? Just because we have kiddos, and kiddos are, have great attention spans, and they do that. How can we engage adults like that, right? To make something work and everything fun, and so they can get into it. I think we have to really rethink how we deliver our content, I think, is the key takeaway for me.
Amazing. Thank you for that key tip, so to speak,
Yeah.
in many ways. So Corey, what would you say is a person that you would like to hear their insights, their interview on an interview like this one on Professor Game Podcast? Is there a person you would like to hear?
I've got a couple of folks for you, actually. And the one is actually, his name is Matthew Homan. So I ran into Matthew. He's the one I was telling you about that has the no PowerPoint rule. So I ran into Matthew. Matthew runs a place in St. Louis called Filament. If he listens to the podcast, he might get mad at me a little bit because I don't know how to frame up his business. Besides, he rethinks how to deliver meeting content, I think, is a good summary of what Matthew does. So he has a center, so to speak, in St. Louis. And again, no PowerPoint rule. He does a myriad of things. He has worksheets and takes people through. I can remember sitting down with Matthew and having this hour conversation with him, and met him through a person, right? And sat down with him. And I'll never forget the table. He had worksheets scattered on the table. There was Play-Doh on the table. We were talking Lego serious play, and we're really just talking about how to open the mind, right? And do different ways of thinking and stuff. So Matthew has just a different approach to how to do things and stuff. So he's a great guy, super intelligent. He actually has quite the background. Even, he was a lawyer at one point in time, actually, and now he does this center or whatever. It's called Filament. You guys have to look it up. But Matthew is great. He's got a different way of thinking, and that was the fastest hour I think that has gone by in my life in recent memory. Right? It was so engaging and so fun to talk about all this stuff, and he has a lot of great tools and resources. So he would be a great one. The next person I would recommend is actually, her name's Christina Scaglione. So Christina joined the team in Mondelēz, the team that I'm on, the operational excellence team, sometime last year. We had worked in similar buckets together, and Christina has a ton of personality. She's a super bubbly person, great to be around, brings a ton of energy, but she has made me better as a result. She would probably tell you she's not super into gamification, but I think she is. She likes to make things fun. She actually is the person that, when we built this workshop for this Nashville conference for Mondelēz, I partnered with Christina. And so she just brings energy and just a different mindset, and she's really open to doing stuff. And she's a very good project manager as well, and does things just in a different way. And she just really likes to, I probably stole this phrase from her. I think I used it earlier as a reference, but she likes to meet people where they are. A little bit, and she likes to do some of that. And you have to you got to be in that support function a little bit, and you got to listen to people, right? You got to be an active listener, and she practices on a lot of these things. So she is very insightful and has a lot of energy, and I know you would love her, just to love her energy alone to be on the podcast. And she has a plethora of experience within Mondelēz and stuff, and just looks at things a little different than other people. So those two are fresh off the mind of who I would recommend to be on the podcast. They're both great people and have made a huge impact on my life over the past couple of years.
They sound like pretty interesting potential guests for the future, for sure. So
yeah.
Talking about those recommendations, is there a book that you recommend the engagers? Again, an audience like this one who's looking forward to, making things fun, using games, gamification, all this stuff.
All right. This might be a little bit of curveball for the audience a little bit, but I would say I would actually recommend Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, right? So I'm sure some folks have read that on the podcast. It's not really in the gamification market, so to speak, but I'll make it make sense. When I was at BJC HealthCare, that's when I went through this book, and I started kind of looking internally, and I developed this kind of practice of like, okay, if folks are not following my process, I've done something wrong. I think I referenced that early on, right? So for me, I have taken that practice a little bit and some of those components that are in that book to rethink some of the workshopping and some of those things that I've did, and even like the presentations, all the things that I've referenced, really the foundation. If we drive to that root cause, which I do oftentimes with my folks within Mondelēz International, is drive to that root cause. The foundation is going to be some of that extreme ownership about, kind of re-looking at, rethinking at, internalizing it, right? It's not really, we shouldn't be in a place where they don't like my workshop because they're just not listening or they're not ready for it, right? Everyone's ready for it. We just got to sometimes rethink and even it created a foundation to lead me down paths of, I know I mentioned improv, and we could talk all day about this path where I try to create a better version of myself and stuff. And a lot of that came from having this inward perspective of how do I get better? How do I take that next step? How do I move forward? And that book really just created that foundation for me. So that would be one book recommendation that I have. One other one I have to toss in that I loved. It's a super short book, is called Everything I Learned About Lean, I Learned in First Grade. So it's a really short book, but I reference it all the time when I'm teaching people at Mondelēz International of like, do you guys remember going to like first grade or kindergarten and how everything's labeled, right? So when I talk about, I'm a big guy on visual management and stuff. And I talk about this probably so much that if people at Mondelēz listen to this, they'll be like, oh man, yeah, he talks about visualizations all the time and visual management. But like, I was like, think about it from a perspective of why that's set up the way it is. And this book will do that for you a little bit and talk about, it makes things a lot easier, right? It cuts down on training. It does all this stuff. So as I teach lean concepts, right? And a lot of this like gamification for me actually goes back to how do we put ourselves in that childlike state a little bit, which for adults is so hard sometimes to like be like, is that okay? Can we do that? And yes, we can. We absolutely can do that and put ourselves back into that place and space and time of being a child, because that's where like that ideation and stuff really blossoms and does well. So that book is well short. Had some key takeaways over time. So those are two for you.
Sounds amazing. Sound like great books, definitely to recommend and to read. Extreme Ownership I had heard of before, for sure.
So good.
So now we get to a question that some might consider a little bit more difficult, which is all about, what would you say is your favorite game?
Well, I've actually not been much of a video game player through the days. I would say traditionally I'm more of a board game type guy. So my family and I have played a variety of things. We really like Exploding Kittens and Throw Burrito. If you haven't played some of those games, those are really fun to do if you have family. But lately it's been actually my daughters and I have two daughters, and we've been hanging out in Mario Kart for the past 6 months or so playing that. And it's just they're in a at a chapter in their life where they can do this and do it well and be competitive with me. And it's a lot of fun. It's a good quality time that we can play and kind of banter with each other about who's doing better and have some fun with that. So right now it's Mario Kart, and I love the reference I used earlier because I learned it when my kids were young, right, about those kids not having a problem sitting in front of a television playing video games. And that is so true when we get to do that. And it takes me to a place in my mind where a place of enjoyment, right, where I'm sitting next to my two daughters and getting to play Mario Kart with them and having fun. And it will evolve over time. We play other games and stuff, like I mentioned, traditionally board games, but we're in a chapter in our life right now where the Nintendo Switch is doing it for us and we're having fun spending quality time together.
Amazing. And in this realm of games, gamification, Lego series play, facilitation and workshops, what would you say in your case is your superpower, that thing that you do at least better than most other people?
This is timely. We're just going through, and Mondelēz going through our development plans and things like that, right? And talking about our strengths and stuff. And I would say workshopping is really good for me, not just running through methodologies and things that already exist, but I'm really good at like meeting people where they are, which I'll steal that again. I gave Christina credit for that, so I'll give her the credit again for that phrase a little bit. But I feel like I'm talented at building workshops. I've done this historically, like not knowing that I've done that through my career, not intentionally. I would just see kind of a gap, and I would always like workshop it, right, and do things just a little bit differently so I can build stuff from the ground up and think about things. We've done a variety of things, from doing like a workshop of like kind of an escape room type thing we did this year, of where teams come together in a room, in a conference room, and they do some of this stuff to kind of work their way out, kind of an escape room type thing. And then our Nashville workshop was actually around leading team meetings and stuff. And we brought in some components of like improvisation and things like that I've picked up over time. I can't take credit for all the things that I've learned, right? I've just been so lucky to stumble upon great people and great things and build some capability that I've brought in these components and stuff. So our workshop in Nashville that we did last week, we had a component where we were running like a team meeting and stuff, and we had people be able to like kind of, we called it mess with your friends, which they do in improv, and they were able to hurl some issues with us in what was a mock team meeting. And they had a lot of fun with that, really hitting me up with a lot of problems and things like that, and watching how I would navigate through it on the spot and use some some of that improv nature that I've learned over time and stuff. But I really like these love, and my superpower would be just building these custom workshops, right? So that would be my superpower that most know about Mondelēz International, and trying to get more folks to know about it, obviously on the outside as well.
Amazing. So Corey, thank you very much for investing this time in spreading the word about what you do, and spreading as well some of your knowledge with the engagers. Is there anything else you want to say before we end the interview? And of course, let us know where we can find more about you and your workshops.
Yeah, I certainly, people can reach out to me, obviously on LinkedIn, connect on there. Happy to even just have conversations, right? Like, I think some of the key learnings that I've had is just by talking to people and having conversations about where they are and what they're doing and stuff. And that's how I've picked up on the things that I've picked up on along the way. And so happy to connect on LinkedIn with anybody and have a phone call. I think I love meeting people and engaging in conversation and learning about their industry. And that's happened over time. But they can also, I have this kind of side project called the Methods Company, which brings in all this methodology together. We talked about a little bit, where they can reach out to me through there. That's where my workshopping kind of exists. You'll see a heavy presence of Lego Serious Play on there, but the end game is really to kind of get into consulting and help people in big ways and get into some of those Lean Six Sigma components. You won't see a large presence of that on my website. It's really Lego Serious Play driven right now, but happy to partner and help folks along the way and look at things a little different, because I think the world is in need of gamification, especially as we look into my pocket of the world and this operations world. I'm pushing hard on gamification, where we need to be able to visualize our key performance indicators and push people and create ways to incentivize people like on the floor and stuff. And again, back to that whole thing about, we don't have to put a kid in front of a TV to play a video game. Why is it that we have to force people sometimes to go to work, right? We need to figure out how to marry those worlds and make it fun and have a good one. So that's the path I'm on, right? With trying to figure out how to change the game for sure for the world and what the operations realm looks like, and really gamify it, right? And make it to where it's a pleasant experience for all.
Amazing. It sounds like you're also having a lot of fun with what you're doing, so that is even better. So Corey, once again, thank you very much for all of this knowledge, all of these understandings, all of the experience that you've been spreading along this episode. However, as you know by now, and as the engagers certainly know, at least for now and for today, it is time to say that it's game over.
Engagers, it is fantastic to have you around, and thank you for listening to the Professor Game podcast, and especially on this episode. And if you want more interviews like this one with incredible guests like Corey, please go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started on our email list for free. That way we can be in contact and you'll be the first to know of anything that we have for you. And remember, as always, before you go on to your next mission, before you move on, remember please to subscribe or follow, whatever that looks like, on your favorite podcast app. All of this is for free. And then listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.